Hey, it's Chris Schmidt with the Average Joe Sports Show, ready for kickoff against UTEP.
I'm Gary Sharp. We'll talk about who needs a hot start.
Hi, everybody. It's Bill Doleman. Who needs to be Nebraska's most improved players this season?
And it's Elijah Herbel here. Let's talk MVP. What Husker at the end of the year is going to be the most valuable player? We'll get into that in the Average Joe Sports Show.
Welcome to it, episode 49 of the Average Joe Sports Show. That's Gary Sharp, Bill Doleman, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt. We are back at it. We are one away from the magic 50. But right now we're holding at 49. We always encourage you to check us out on YouTube, the Average Joe Sports Show. Like and subscribe. The AJ Sports Pod on Twitter. And yes, Spotify and iTunes. If you just want the audio. We're not pretty enough for you. Guys, it is college football season, the most beautiful time of year. Big Red kicks off Saturday, 2:30 on Fox against UTEP. And maybe this Walden won't beat Nebraska. I was kind of just searching through the 92 Iowa State-Nebraska game for my own personal pain. And old Coach Jim Walden, one of our friends, the picture still hangs in his office, that final scoreboard, just to proof that it happened, as he tells us. So, guys, it's Nebraska UTEP. How about it? A lot of storylines, quarterbacks to smile about if you're Nebraska, and you know what? A line Vegas is proud of.
I think this is great that these two teams are playing. Nebraska is going to write a $1.65 million check as part of the Doc Sadler Invitational.
Finally the payoff.
I mean, but can we just, before we dive into this, can we just out loud talk about the crazy nugget that this is the first time in 5 years that Nebraska football has opened at home? Nebraska football, 5 years, haven't opened at home. Well, Minnesota playing North Carolina, it's their 12th straight year they've opened at home.
Wow.
Yeah, there needs to be a reassessment of whatever you sent the league office last year for the holiday season needs to be done again. Because think about it, the COVID year with the Buckeyes, 2021, the pig farmer, we were up at that one. And then 2022, was the international incident in Ireland.
Hey, which, by the way, the anniversary was, as we taped this on Wednesday the 28th, was yesterday.
Yeah.
Well, if you want to get favor from the conference, maybe you shouldn't sue them back in 2020. That's a great way to get on a commissioner's bad side. So it's the Petiti era. It's a new era for Husker athletics because you're not on the commissioner's bad side anymore.
Avoid the legal fees. That advice from Elijah. I love it, man. That's putting that down.
You know, it is remarkable, though, because you go back in time and when there were just a handful of powers that be in college football who basically determined everything that was going to transpire during the season, most notably Bear Bryant, who would say at the beginning of the season, we're going to be playing in the Sugar Bowl for the national championship or the Orange. And he dictated everything. Paterno dictated everything. Devaney and Osborne. And it was just, we're going to play a home game to kick off the season. Then we're going to bring in somebody else and give them a check, probably for, maybe $100,000 as our sacrificial team for week 2. Then we'll go on the road and play somebody. But it was such a pattern every year. A couple of home games out of the gate, go on the road, maybe play a sort of a name team, wrap up the non-conference and play 7 Big 8 games. Every year was the pattern. And now, what was the last Nebraska football home game to begin a season? Wasn't Akron.
No. Who was it?
Wasn't
they
it
won?
Arkansas State?
Was it? No. Was it Ark State or was it South Alabama or somebody like that?
No, that was not an opener for South Alabama. Okay. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it was Arkansas State, the game that – was that – no, what was 2019?
2019 was Arkansas State, wasn't it?
Okay.
Let's see. That's the fact that we can't remember the last time Nebraska played a home game and who is another part of the story.
No, Schmidt, you were right. It was South Alabama before Nebraska went to Boulder.
So say 2017 was Arkansas State because that was Elijah's first year of college. That was my welcome to the Mike Riley experience with. I believe it was Arkansas State scoring a late touchdown, recovering an onside as I'm already walking out of the stadium. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to the car. I'm going back to my seat now. And got to watch the end of that one as Husker Nation was fully clinched. And I believe it was like was it a 3-point game or a 7-point game? And Nebraska was terrified late in that one. That was brutal.
Well, look at, Western Illinois. Just weird openers that we used to kind of take for granted because Nebraska would win 76-14 and every guy on the roster would play.
Yep.
Like some of the openers of late at home have been too close for comfort. So I think this is a good place to start because the spread is 27.5. It really hasn't changed much. We know what UTEP brings. There is somewhat of the great unknown. We know Nebraska's situation. How important do you guys think it is that Nebraska, with the most anticipated season in a long time, where people expect you to win, that Nebraska wins handily on Saturday?
I think the fan base is juiced for what the hope of a better offense, the hope of a rock star defense, Matt Rule, year 2. There's all of these traces in history under Rule that you're reaching for if you're a Nebraska fan because of the success that's been at other programs. I think if it looks okay by the end of the ball game, cover or 35-13, something like that, you'll be okay. If there's a little bit of a struggle to get there or it's a little tighter at halftime, I think the fan base will deal okay with it. It's not ideally what you want because we'll go in and score half 100 easy and quickly, right? Deliver. But I'm thinking that if it ends well, all's well with this because it is going to be Dylan's first start. There's hope. There's butterflies. And UTEP is screwed. The Rule's making them sound like they're Bama, for God's sake.
I'm not sure that the guy didn't leave a better job than the one he has.
Well, he brought
compete at UTEP.
Yeah, and he brought some of those dudes with him. I think if it ends up around that 3 to 4 touchdown number, you're all right. Tackle well. Don't be sloppy with penalties.
And the football.
And the football. I think you do those 3 things and you win by 17 to 28 points. I think Nebraska fans will be okay. I don't know what type of artwork they're expecting week 1.
2-score win and 2 or fewer turnovers, and I think Nebraska fans will be happy.
2 or fewer against UTEP? Give me 1 or few. I think you can.
Yeah. I know. Look, I'm going on past performance is future indication, right? I'm going. There might be a couple of turnovers, but it cannot be a sloppy fumble fest, right? There might be a pick on a ball that's overthrown or something, and you're bound to get somebody who's going to put a hat on a football, and you might lose it that way. But to have your quarterback take a snap from center or drop a shotgun snap, that's inexcusable. That should never happen, and that happened way too often last year. It was just lazy play with the ball. You're going to have picks. You're going to get hit hard. You're going to get stripped. I get that. But the laziness and the sloppiness, that has got to go away. So I'm being forgiving with 2 or fewer.
Well, and that would be very forgiving of Husker Nation because let's remember here, not to be disrespectful, it's UTEP. There's a lot of better teams on your schedule. I understand it's week 1 and weird stuff happens in week 1. Mistakes happen in week 1. You know what? You're playing a team like UTEP so you can correct those mistakes. So even if you do turn the ball over 2 or 3 times, you can still end the game with a W and you can move on. You can get better from it. But it's UTEP. Apparently this coaching staff has emphasized limiting turnovers all off season long. I'm going to keep it more simple. I'm going to say, can Nebraska at least win or be even in the turnover differential? If Nebraska turns the ball over twice, but the defense gets 2 takeaways, I think Husker Nation is all right. If the offense turns it over twice, the defense doesn't get any takeaways, that's where some of the forgiveness starts to go away. So that's how I'm going to define it. Is like, you'd like to have it to be one or less, because it's first game. One could happen, and I think Husker Nation will forgive you. If it's more than that, the defense has to work their tail off to make sure that turnover differential is at least even, because that's how you get out of this with Husker Nation forgiving you. If not, even if it's a win at the end of the day, but you turn the ball over 2 times, 3 times, oh man, are we going to have plenty to talk about in our Monday radio shows.
Yeah, UTEP last year, and remember, they lost their best pass rusher, his 4th-round pick in the NFL. Their defensive backfield is pretty good. Mm-hmm. They do have some new linebackers. But even with all that said, last year, they only averaged about a turnover a game in taking the ball away. And there's a prop out there for Raiola of 243.5 passing yards, half an interception. I honestly, and I know it's week number 1, but I look at, this is the guys that will start out first on Saturday are veteran. I would be very disappointed if Nebraska was sloppy. I expect defense to be on point. I expect, just like last year, Nebraska, for the most part, to tackle well right out of the gate, which is a problem across college football in week 0 or week 1. So I expect Nebraska to look not well-oiled, but better than a performance that you might anticipate on week 1. I think Nebraska comes out and they play really, really well. Good teams win, great teams cover. What better way to start than on week 1 against a team that probably will have much more of an adjustment to getting to know, the guy to the left and to the right of them than you will as the home team.
All super valid, as UTEP is going to be a bit quirky with some of their formations. The tackling part is so key, and that's a great point about in a tough ball game a year ago with the walk-off in Minneapolis. Nebraska tackled their ass off. I mean, there was very few missed tackles. There's about 3 or 4 guys around the ball carrier. Minnesota could not run the football. You have the Great Wall of Husker up front with Nash and Ty Robinson to clog that middle. No, I think you guys are on it with what it needs to look like. And if it looks easy or it's breezy, that's icing. I'm anxious to see this team with adversity. And there needs to be a couple of moments of adversity Saturday that they respond to. How do you respond with a drive after a turnover and a young quarterback if it happens? How do you respond if, God forbid, one of your leaders on defense, and there's 100 of them, gets hurt? Not season ending or anything like that, but what if you lose a key cog? It's the opener. It's against a team you're more talented of, but between the years is going to be the story of 2024 for Nebraska, and how the couch time that's been spent this offseason is translated to the field. I mean, that's going to be what 2024 is about. Yes, they'll win, but do they kind of hit that potential? Do they reach the potential?
And I think, it'd be good for this team, and I'm going to be careful with my words here because I'm going to have to explain it to make it make sense, because I know on its face it's not going to make sense. I want this team against UTEP to have moments of stress. I want them to be stressed, but I don't want them to be truly tested against UTEP. You're getting truly tested if UTEP takes it down the field in the first possession. You're inside your own 10. Now the defense has to hold that UTEP team to a field goal as opposed to a touchdown. That's a test. You'd like to see them stressed. Hey, maybe UTEP picks up a first down or 2 in the first drive. Now they have the ball at midfield. You're trying to keep them out of field goal range as opposed to the previous scenario where you're trying to keep them out of the end zone. That's kind of what I'm talking about here. I'd like to have some moments where this Husker offense, you know what? They commit a penalty, they find themselves 3rd and 12, and we get to see what Dylan Raiola can do as a true drop back passer with his arm, beating a secondary whenever the defense knows what kind of play is coming. As opposed to hey, it's a tie ball game. You have 3rd down in the 4th quarter, and you need to pick up a first down to keep the drive moving, make sure UTEP doesn't get the ball back. That's a test, as opposed to a stress, which is hey, there's some moments where this team is going to have to prove that they're better than last year, but it's not like the game's ever going to be in doubt. That's what I'm looking for from this UTEP game. Gary, you laid out the secondary with UTEP. They have some experience. You want them to stress Raiola. You know what? They're going to bait you in some coverages, and you're going to have to look at your first read and realize that what you had pre-snap is not there post-snap, that would be ideal for Raiola, because that's one of the more difficult things to do as a quarterback. From a defensive point of view, like, hey, UTEP is probably going to pick up some yards. Can you make sure that you're a sure tackling team and those yards don't turn into 60-yard gains that sets up UTEP in the red zone? Like, stressed but not tested is what I want for this game for Nebraska.
Mm-hmm.
Well, being at home, I think, is also critical. Going back to the schedule, if you go back to the opener last year and a last-second loss at Minnesota, okay, you've got a stress test right out of the gate, and you got to do it on the road. I mean, they keep talking about the crowd and the gold out and all that. The atmosphere in Minnesota last year sure was, heavy-handed to the home team, but it's not going to be anything like at Memorial Stadium with the crowd behind you. So, I look at it 4 scenarios. Nebraska wins big, great. If they are tested, stressed, and win by a little, I think that there may be some fragility to their confidence. If they lose another close game or get blown out, then it's going to be awful. So, I think comfortably means a couple scores. Mm-hmm. But if Nebraska is tested and stressed at home, going back to what Schmidt said, what is the mentality? How strong is the confidence on this team? Right now, it's sky high. But if UTEP comes in here, pushes Nebraska around, scares the hell out of the Big Red, like Louisiana Tech with Tim Rattay and Troy Edwards did back in Frank Solich's first game.
That was always in the back pocket. We know this.
That's like, what do we got going on here with this new coach Solich, right? I think Nebraska's got to put together a confidently comfortable performance on Saturday to carry some momentum into Colorado and not be thinking, we barely beat UTEP at home. We got to regroup. And then it becomes psychological preparations going into Colorado as opposed to being marching in to get some revenge on the Buffs.
Yeah. The other thing, last thing I want to see, we'll get to this plays into the Raiola factor, guys. Something I've been thinking about is the offensive coordinator and what is dialed up, what's scripted, and what do you go to in game to get your quarterback and your offense in rhythm. I mean, how do you, they're not going to ease into things. It's deep into the pool. That was at least communicated earlier this week. What does Satterfield have ready and locked in for his young quarterback to get some confidence and get some rhythm? How do you get a running back room or back or two in rhythm if you want to run the football? You got a left tackle spot that is not new to Turner Corcoran, but he's a guy that you need big things from. Those are some things here, and what's on the sheet, what's being called. Are you calling what's working, or are you going to be calling what you want to call, right? That's an element for me on Saturday as well, just to have things go as well as possible on offense for your young phenom. What's he showed you in practice? Is that what's in the game Saturday?
Can I, before and that's a great point, Schmidt. Guys, how do we feel about Marcus Satterfield? And I'm not saying this is a negative, but remember, everybody was kind of hesitant looking at his past history at South Carolina before he took over calling plays last season. And then we had some angst, and Jeff Sims turnovers, but just some of the play calling. Then the season kind of went along, and you had Harburg, and you had to adjust. But we haven't really talked about Satterfield, the OC, right? We've talked about Satterfield not being the quarterback coach and how Glenn Thomas is a great addition to that room. But we don't know now, with more weapons probably than he's ever had as a play caller, what do the plays look like? Is Marcus Satterfield calling plays to score points or to win games? And I think in this offense, you call plays to win games, which means you have some pet plays. You have some things that maybe you run early that set up later. We saw that when it's been effective at Nebraska with an elite play caller as a head coach. He would run things in the first and second quarter that maybe only got 3 yards, and maybe he'd run another variation of it just to see And then they go back to it in the third quarter, and those 3 yards would turn into 15, and by the fourth quarter, they were 40, and you were hitting your head on the goalpost. I think it's very curious to see how he manages all the options that he's had, because he's never had this ability to have a quarterback that can make consistent throws at all 3 levels, and you would think enough of a running game to get some yardage. But I think, Schmidt, to answer your question and to spin it around our quad box, I think they don't, you would say, hey, let's run the ball to get Dylan into a comfortable spot. I say, man, you got some dudes that are catching a football, and you got a guy that likes to spin it. Let's get his confidence by spinning the football instead of, hey, first couple of downs, let's just run the football. No, you have an identity. Let's throw the football, which I think Nebraska will do plenty of this year.
Well, a key factor for Nebraska this year, and Matt Rhule talked about it in his opening press conference. He's talked about it through a lot of this offseason. He talks about the toxic differential and specifically getting explosive plays. If that is truly what Nebraska wants to be offensively, explosive, I think you do need to look at what Nebraska has offensively. Do you like their odds more to be explosive on the ground or through the air? Because I think I know my answer. When you look at the weapons on the outside, compare that to the running back room where no one has really differentiated himself. I like Nebraska's odds to be explosive through the air. And if you're only trying to get explosive on 3rd and long, defenses know it's coming. You're not going to be able to do it. There's going to have to be times where Marcus Satterfield airs it out on early downs if you want to be able to be explosive like Matt Rhule and this staff claims to be.
What's your reliable? Let me ask you this: what's your reliable yardage per pass attempt or completion? Even you're talking about being explosive in the passing game. Does that mean Jalen Lloyd, you go long for 60, or does that mean we are looking to be consistently effective in the 15 to 20 yard explosive play where you just continually are able to hit those passes that are going to get you, that are designed to get you first down and more? Is that what Nebraska's passing game is? Or is it we've got explosive receivers that we're just going to try to hit a bunch of home runs?
I'll say this. If the simple turns into explosive, great. Think of Jalen Lloyd against Wisconsin. That should have been a 13-yard completion. Lloyd busts a tackle, takes it to the house for 58. Okay, yak yards. That's something you're going to be able to see in Nebraska's passing game this year with all their weapons. But if push comes to shove, if you're going up against an Iowa or an Ohio State, you're going to be on the road. Is your offense able to just move the sticks, find the tight end, back down to Ramir, hit an out route for 7 or a comeback? Can you run it for 4 or 5? And does that 5 turn into 12 in the fourth quarter? That's what I don't know. Are they going to be 2.0 Air Whipple and throw it deep to Palmer? Or let's throw it up to Malachi like last year, because that's the only way they scored their points was a big play. It was a tribute to Harry and Jamal Lord, for God's sake. I mean, it was because there was very few 8-play, 79-yard drives where you just kept punch, and then the levee broke.
Well,
so they need to be able to do both. They need to be able to methodically move the football at some point.
I think it kind of gets to the age-old question, though. Whenever you talk about identity, you can talk about running the ball, throwing the ball, whatever. Nebraska wants to be balanced. At their heart, is Nebraska going to run to set up the pass, or are they going to pass to set up the run? And that's what I think a great unknown is going into this season.
I think just based off comments from Rhule about his running backs and essentially – I think kind of putting his position coach on notice of, hey, 4 needs to turn into 12. 12 needs to turn into, a big number. And we're not able to do that. I think, Elijah, to answer your question, I think I put my run the damn ball hat in the closet. I think it's the pass. Maybe not necessarily to set up the run, but to make the quarterback handoff game more successful.
Well, it'll be balanced. This is the Average Joe Sports Show. Find us on YouTube and on Twitter at the AJ Sports Pod, Spotify and iTunes. Bill Doleman, Gary Sharp, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt. Looking at Nebraska UTEP. Let's hit on some of those coaches, Sharpie, 3 players, 3 coaches that need a hot start. And you alluded to Barthel in that running back room. Is that your obvious choice? Or are you going somewhere else with a coach on the roster that needs a good season?
So I'm going to just say hot start. Ed Foley is number 1 because I think Nebraska with their freshmen, man, those dogs want to eat and they want to be on the field, and they're going to play on a lot of the teams. And there's a lot of excitement there. There's a lot of speed. There's a lot of athleticism. I think Nebraska on the return and defend part of the special teams will be okay. But we all know what is the place kicker, the punter, the kick returner, and the punt returner. What are they all going to look like? So Ed Foley is a guy that needs a hot start because Ed Foley is feeling it. He's admitted it. So his group, they need to get off to a hot start. Then E.J. Barthel, because it might be like a 3-week tryout before the Big Ten opener to decide who that bell cow is. I mean, are they going to make it all the way to November, about 3 months from now to play and get to Black Friday and go, man, we have 4 guys. Guys, we have depth. That room has to be managed better because I did not like some of the times the rotation and the personnel they had on the field did not match the play calling, if that makes sense. And then the third coach is Matt Rule. Rule is in a great spot here because he can look in the mirror. If this works or doesn't work, he can look in the mirror and see the reason why. And as a competitor, that's what you want. All the other distractions, any excuses, they're gone. It's all about you. So I would go Ed Foley, E.J. Barthel, and Matt Rule. Need a hot start to the season.
I'm not going to disagree on the Matt Foley's dad because I think the special teams are critical, right? And I think Gary, you're coming at it from a return game, especially. I can't think. I guess DeMornay perhaps was Nebraska's most consistent recent
Spielman
return guy. Spielman, DeJuan Gross. But I think, Barney showed something in the spring game when he returned that kick only to get tackled by the gray-shirted kicker who he thought he was on his own team. So I think Barney showed something like Nebraska might have a return guy, and there might be some competition. At the beginning of last year, it was just given to Billy Kemp. Oh, you're the return man, and I think it's been kind of that way for the last couple of years. But instead of just giving it to somebody because they're a sure-handed receiver, I think they have people that can be excellent returners, which is good. But I look at it, though, on the kicking side, and I think I mentioned it in our last show and also on Hail Varsity. Alvano has got to be better, markedly better than what he was when you said, well, he's just a freshman. Well, I can remember when Chris Brown was just a freshman or Alex Henry. Some of those guys were really good freshmen, and they had consistent careers. Alvano, I know he's been hurt. He needs to be healthy, and his backup better be ready, whoever that might be. So I do look at the special teams in Ed Foley in that regard. But we already mentioned Marcus Satterfield. Look, last year it was the offensive coordinator position title, and it was the quarterback's coach, and he's new here and all of that. Well, now you got Glenn Thomas, who's the quarterback whisperer, and you've got a 5-star to work with, and now you're the offensive coordinator working with tight ends. How is that all going to work together? If you're the guy who is in charge of this offense, but you've got somebody who is directly working with Dylan Raiola, Heinrich Harburg, and company, I think there's a lot on Marcus Satterfield to have a much better season in terms of whatever the personnel groupings are. For the love of God, don't throw it on 1st and 5 or whatever it is. When you got a chance to win a game against Maryland, some of those plays got to be thrown out of the book and not have some head scratchers, right? So I think it's a little bit on him. And then, we're not really talking about defensive coaches too much. I think Nebraska people feel like it's solidified with Knighton and Dvorak and like what Butler's done since coming in. How is Garrett McGuire going to keep all of those thoroughbreds in the wide receiver room happy? Because they got some players. They got some speed. And I think number one is Jamal Banks. But there's some guys that, are here at Nebraska because they thought they were going to big play people. And it used to be, how are you going to keep all the running backs happy? How are you going to keep all those wide receivers happy?
Well, and I think McGuire's the guy that avoided arrows last season, A, because of the quarterback play, and B, because he had a guy in Jalen Lloyd come on so strong at the end of last season. If you think back to the first couple games last year, there weren't many wide receivers getting open for those quarterbacks. We can maybe see it a little better. I remember the Colorado game sitting up in the press box and being like, well, Jeff Sims had one guy there briefly, but he was covered pretty well. And Jeff Sims threw it late, and it's an interception, and Colorado goes in to score, and now it's 14-0, whatever the score was. There's things that allowed McGuire to pass the buck, but the receivers weren't great last year. I think he was saved by the fact that, as I said, the quarterback play was bad, and then you had Lloyd come on so strong at the end of last year. That can be a shining example you can point to of, Garrett McGuire is doing a great job. He's got, as Bill said, thoroughbreds in that wide receiver room this year. How is he going to handle them? Is he going to have guys that are going to be able to get open, make your freshman quarterback look better than he is? Because that's a big factor here whenever you have the freshman quarterback, getting him confidence. Are those receivers able to haul in the ones they're supposed to? Are they able to make a big snag on third down where the defense knows you're going to be throwing the ball and it's a jump ball for the receiver for, let's say, Banks? Is he able to come down with that? Get enough separation first to get open and then come down with a tough contested catch. Questions I have for Garrett McGuire at the beginning of this season. But I also want to add here, and Schmidt, I'll let you jump in here in a second as well. I want to see what John Butler does early this season. We've heard so many positive reports out of him from fall camp, but it's still a guy that joined the system really late. Whenever you look at the 3 first opponents that you have on this schedule, UTEP, they're going to want to air the ball out. They're a pass-happy attack. Colorado loves stressing you deep down the field. That's kind of how I define their offense, is their run the ball and deep passing. They're not much in the way of short to intermediate routes. They love pushing the ball downfield. That's going to stress your defensive backs. And then Northern Iowa, I know it's an expected win, but it's another team that's going to throw the ball all over you most likely. They're on their 3rd offensive coordinator in the past 12 months, but their new offensive coordinator comes from the Mike Leach philosophy of air raid attack. I think that's what Northern Iowa is going to be running. You have 3 opponents that are all going to be testing the defensive back room early in the season. You're our new position coach. You showed up late. Are you going to have those guys ready to go against some pass-happy attacks? I'm going to add Butler to the list of being a coach that needs to prove something early.
You guys have made a lot of great cases for the hot start. And the more I think about it, I think the undisputed call is Barthel. Your running back room needs to be good, needs to be complementary. You've got players there. You've got different roles. The McGuire case is strong to one ball to keep all those dudes happy. I think your culture is strong in that room, though, especially with a guy like Banks. So if you're winning, you're probably not going to chirp. I would hope you're not chirping. But I'm going to go back to Sat, and he's got a bit of a high wire to walk. Show what I can do with a 5-star. Show future recruits on offense what we can do as an offense and showcase that for all the dudes showing up for under the lights. You're always advertising on offense. But most importantly, be effective in game in the 4th quarter and find what you can be great at that you're not real easy to stop. Again, the old identity thing. If the identity is letting Dylan gunsling it, fine. But it is a juggling act that there's a reason you're getting paid as much as you are. I will say this, from a brain trust standpoint, I trust the head coach and I trust the co-coordinator to be a couple of other voices that can interject if things don't get off to a smooth start or they're not as, or it's rockier than you'd expect. But no, I think Sat's got a really fun menu to look at. You just got to figure out how he wants to order.
Yeah. On the heels of that, and something both Elijah and Bill kind of alluded to, I'm going back when we were talking about identity and balance and stuff. Do you guys recall the last time? Because this time last year, Rule really hit on, we want to be able to run for 75 or more yards in the 4th quarter. Has he mentioned that in a long time?
He said that they want to be physical. He's reiterated wanting to be physical and run the football. Yeah, we want to run the football, but it was almost as, gotta still be able to run the football. That's important. But no, I think the philosophy has shifted a bit to, this is the dude you got. He's an armed talent. Let's not be afraid to use it.
Do you feel better about Dylan Raiola being able to get you 250 yards a game through the air, or do you feel better about your running backs being able to get you 250 yards on the ground? Kind of gets back to
that's the question.
That is a great question. I will take the guy that is slinging it.
Yep.
And the guys who are catching it.
Yeah. Elijah, you're absolutely right. The wide receiver room, outside of the quarterback room with one guy added, is the most improved on the roster. I also think last year, Garrett McGuire in his first year as a Power 5 head coach and that youth was dealt a bad hand. Remember, he thought he was going to have bets. He had some guys go down with injury. He's a young guy that all of a sudden's got to play young kids who maybe are not buying into what he's saying. And I thought they got sideways as the year went along, and they were just grasping at pieces. But the transformation is quite interesting, and I'm glad, Elijah, you brought this up, and I agree with your points, is Nebraska announces their depth chart at wide receiver where I think Matt Rule said, I'm sorry, Garrett. Man, I owe it to your dad. I owe it to the family. I brought you here for a reason. We're going to take care of your position group. We're going to go get some dudes on the recruiting trail, and we're going to go spend some money to get you 2 top wide receivers because we know Jalen Lloyd will develop. Guys, that's a position group at Nebraska that if I told you on December 1 when we were doing the Average Joe Sports Show, hey, that Malachi Coleman who started 5 or 6 games last year, that Alex Bullock who had 599 snaps, when we get the first depth chart, they're going to be third team. You guys would have said either, yeah, that's how it should be, or you're crazy. I think that kind of goes into a little bit of the wide receiver room and how it's unknown but kind of known, but will be a huge part of successful football on the offensive side.
You've got options, Bill. They've got options at wide receiver. That's important. They didn't have a lot of options last year.
Well, and I think it also speaks to how significant the college football, the acquisitions of Banks and Nayor are. Yeah. Those are 2 great pickups. And I'm a big Banks guy. I'm going to talk about him in a little bit when we have another subject here. But I think that may be one of the top transfer portal acquisitions of anybody in the country. Mm-hmm. And to have some of those guys who were around last year be in the program now, and they're behind them on the depth chart. And Nayor's got something to prove too, having been at Wyoming and then at Texas, gone through injury and finally being healthy, and by all accounts, a very good leader. But I think that those 2 receivers to head up that room are significant for Nebraska, for Garrett McGuire. I don't put any pressure necessarily on Garrett McGuire. I just think he has a very talented room, and he's got to make sure that the right players are in the right places for the right play call so that they can exploit their talents. Now, I also want to go back to just real quickly. I don't know if we lost Gary, but in talking about coaches that need a good start, I agree with him about Matt Rule, because this can't be. And I was just mentioning, Gary, that this is a season for Matt Rule. He doesn't have the luxury that he had at Temple and at Baylor. He went 1, 6, and 10 in his 3 seasons at Temple, first 3 seasons. It was like 2, 7, and 11, something like that at Baylor. This has to be the equivalent of year 3. We didn't have a 1-win, 2-win season, and then, hey, we're looking to get to a bowl game and show market improvement in year 2. Year 1 and 2 was a combination. Now, I'm not saying 10 and 11 wins, but Nebraska has to be playing like those Temple and Baylor teams did in Matt Rule's 3rd season. Mm-hmm. Right? And I think they got the right guy. I think his plan is great. He's one of the most talked about coaches in the country, and justifiably so. But this is not year 2. This has to really be the success and the style of play, the organization. Everything is in place for him and his staff to succeed. They have every bell, whistle, and toy at their disposal. They have money. They brought in players. This is year 3 type success that Nebraska has to have.
And I'm kind of ready.
Realizes that.
And I'm kind of ready to retire like the year 2. Like, I think we can look back at Temple and Baylor and say, yeah, that's really important. It's great context for Matt Rule's rebuild of Nebraska. But so much in college football has changed. I mean, not only just the job, the resources that you have at Nebraska, NIL, facilities, fan support, all of that. The transfer portal has come into college football. I mean, you're able to get a 5-star quarterback who might be, not to be too hyperbolic here, but might be like one of the most prepared high school quarterbacks we've seen coming out of high school because of his lineage, who his dad was, the fact that he's studying NFL defenses as an elementary school whenever his dad is doing his film study at night. There's little Dylan sitting on the lap, soaking up the intricacies of an NFL defense. Like, we haven't seen anything like that before. Combine it with the fact that high school quarterbacks are more ready for college football than they ever have been before. Like, you have that, you have the portal, you have all of this new stuff in college football. Like, it's important context. Yes, the Temple and Baylor rebuilds, but I don't think we need to look and say, well, he got 5 wins better in year 2 at Temple, 5 wins better in year 2 at Baylor. He's going to be 5 wins better at year 2 at Nebraska. This is a different case study. It's important context, but I don't think you need to look at year 2 and year 3 and say, well, this is Matt Rule's way. Matt Rule's way is going to change as his resources and as college football changes. And college football has changed. His resources have changed. I don't think he wants it to be like Temple and like Baylor. I think he wants Nebraska to be its own thing, its own rebuild.
I think he understands the opportunity in front.
Yeah.
You've got 17 starters back. You've got a guy that can pull the trigger at quarterback. You've got your defensive coordinator. You've got a lot, and you've got everyone says manageable schedule. It's not an easy schedule. It's easier than in past seasons, but it all lines up, right? And he gets it. I think he knows it. I think he feels his own urgency, not just the hope of the fans. I think there's absolutely internal urgency, because what do you head into year 3 with? I mean, how hot can you go into year 3 if you do what you think you can do in year 2? Let's spend a minute on a couple of things before we wind it down. Guys, we'll go around the horn here. Most improved Husker this year, and then we'll hit MVP and we'll end with predictions. Sharpie, most improved.
Emmett Johnson.
Okay. That's fair. He had a really good finish to last season. He might be their most complete back, and able to catch, block, and then, of course, run it between the tackles. Bill, what do you think about most improved?
Well, I am not going to mention Tristan Alvano again, but no. I think Turner Corcoran, I'm not saying he's going to be. I think he has to be.
That's a good way to phrase it.
Right. I've mentioned it before. I like what Donovan Raiola did with Bryce Benhart last year. And they talked about him being all Big Ten caliber. And now with Teddy Prohaska done, and the big question mark for Nebraska's offensive line that had depth is now, all right, let's see how good that depth is as the starter now at left tackle, and how they develop somebody behind him. But I think from the time that the news broke that Teddy Prohaska was out, that, okay, Turner, you got to be the most improved guy on this team, so that left tackle is no longer a question mark but an answer.
Elijah?
Okay, I've been wrestling with this one in terms of who the most improved Husker is going to be. I think I've settled on Jamari Butler. I think the improved weight from the reports you hear out of fall camp has really changed the way he plays, and he was quietly a guy that was wreaking havoc last year.
He's good.
I didn't think he had the same praise as a guy, Ty Robinson, Nash Hutmacher. Those guys got the headlines, but Jamari had, I believe, was he tied for the team lead or solo in the team lead for tackles for loss last year? Had a good number of sacks as well. It sounds like the increased weight has been great for him. I think he's a guy that could be talking one of the all-conference teams by the end of the year, whether that's first team, second team, third team. And I think that'd be a big jump. Maybe not as improved as somebody that wasn't playing much last year. It's kind of hard to say a guy that was a consistent starter, one of your better defensive players last year, is going to be most improved. I think from a splash play point of view, and from the perspective of the amount of attention that he's receiving from fans, I think I'm going to go Jamari Butler. I struggle to say that because I don't think his floor is as low as some of these other guys, like, say, Turner Corcoran. But I think we're going to be talking about him a lot more this year than we did last year. I think he's going to be a guy that makes more of an impact on defense.
Name I'm going to throw at you is a young guy that I think it really is do or die is a tough word to say, but Malachi Coleman, that wide receiver room is loaded. He has two older mentors that have come in, specifically Banks, and showed him how to be a pro. I mean, they have attacked it with not taking anything for granted. There is a lot of wide receivers on the horizon and some freshmen that are in that wide receiver room. And if you don't produce, you're just going to keep possibly getting passed on future depth charts. You have all the skills, man. You got to stay healthy too. I mean, that's huge. And he's been dinged, so that's not completely fair. But he needs to stay healthy, and he needs to watch what's been going on with those two portal guys. And I'm sure he has been. And this is how you go about it every day. Because, man, if that guy can stay healthy and there's some consistency, the world's his oyster because of how big and fast and athletic he is. And there's pressure, too, because he's a local guy. You want the local guys to thrive. At least I do, watching him for as many years as we did, covering him in high school. So Malachi is somebody that I think needs to be your most improved. I think there's that opportunity. MVP. That's where we go. Sharpie?
Tommy Hill.
Okay. Mr. Doleman.
Jamal Banks.
Good call.
I think he's going to make the freshman quarterback better. I think he's going to make the room better. And I think he's going to make the team better because I think on that offense, because the defense is dominating all the single digits, I think he just carries himself like a pro. He's a leader.
Mm-hmm. Elijah.
Let me go Isaac Gifford. First off, I got to show love to a fellow Lincoln Southeast alum, but also it's a guy that was good last year. Definitely made a big jump in year one under Matt Rule from the final year of Frost / Mickey Joseph into Rule. I think he took quietly one of the bigger strides on the team. I think he's going to take another stride. I think he's really important as a leader in that defensive backfield and just everything they ask him to do, from pass coverage to run fits to everything. He did it well last year. I think he's ready to be a guy that can go from solid to making some splash plays defensively, because that's the one thing I think his game lacked last year was splash plays. I think another year in the training program, another year in that strength and conditioning program, another fall camp under his belt, I think he's going to be a guy that's ready to make some splash plays. I think we're going to be talking about him more this year.
Okay, man, who is my MVP? You know, I think Thomas Fidone. I'm going to go offense. And you've got your position coach that is your offensive coordinator. Nebraska and Rule want to be an offense that features tight end mismatches, that positionless offense. Well, I think Fidone can not only be the guy in the red zone, but also somebody that can get your freshman quarterback comfortable. And with him being a problem over the middle or in the flat, I think it opens up a lot of the passing game. So I think from a problem on offense, I think Fidone could be in for a big year. Sentimentally, it'd be really cool to have your jack of everything, Mr. Harburg, be a close second. I know that there's been a lot of talk about him, but he could be if called into duty on top of whatever role they decide to give him.
I'm surprised nobody here mentioned anyone from Nebraska's best position group, which I think is probably pretty undeniably at this point the defensive line. And that's
there's 8 to 10 guys you can choose.
That's the nature of the position. Right. Lines of scrimmage aren't sexy to talk about, but I do want to give a shout out to the defensive line. I think that's going to be your best position group this season. Probably should have picked somebody from the defensive line as an
I about went Jamari. Yeah. So.
Well, I was going to mention when we were talking about people have to have a hot start. I think there's a little bit of pressure on Ty Robinson to prove why you came back. right? I think, look, he's an elite player. He should be first team All Big Ten, should be a first or second day, a first round pick in the NFL draft, my opinion, of course, but he came back for a reason. There's precedent to it. Grant and Jason came back in 97 to win a national title. They could have gone to the NFL after the 96 campaign, said, no, we're coming back. We're going to win a national championship, and they did. Not saying that Ty Robinson came back to win a national championship, but to bring Nebraska football back into the every Saturday conversation, and he is the leader in that regard. So I'm not saying that he's got to be better. He just needs to be the guy who said, I'm coming back because I want to be a part of this.
Predictions. It's the Average Joe Sports Show. We're talking season opener, the AJ Sports Pod. Find us on Twitter. The AJ Sports Show is where you can find us on YouTube, Spotify, and iTunes. You guys want to get into the score? You good with that?
Yeah.
I'll jump in first. Not quite a cover. A touchdown and a couple of field goals is all the black shirts allow. You see enough on offense to feel good going into Colorado. 38-13, Nebraska wins, but I think UTEP covers. Elijah?
I'm going to go 35-6, which is barely a cover from Nebraska. I think it's going to be kind of backdoor in that second half, maybe not fourth quarter late, but second half, I think you have maybe a second unit touchdown against UTEP. I think the black shirts really stand up, though. UTEP might get some yards. I don't think they get many points out of it. So I think it's going to be a game you look back on. Defense is going to be the all-stars. 35-6, Nebraska gets it done.
I will go 42-10. It might be a little bit closer at halftime, but I think Nebraska's depth will start to wear down on UTEP in the second half, and Nebraska wins 42-10.
I don't get into the prediction game. So 88-6, Nebraska wins it, kicking off a season in which chambers of commerce of bowl cities fight in December to invite the Big Red to Florida, to Arizona, to Michigan, to parts unknown bowl games. As Nebraska kicks off an unbeaten campaign with a win over UTEP. So there you go.
Bill Doleman, Citrus Bowl, Orlando against Trev.
Hey,
huh?
Nebraska's gonna be the NIL team of bowl games, because the chambers of commerce all over the country, if Nebraska's bowl eligible, will be doing whatever they can to try to position themselves to get the Huskers and their 70,000 fans into their stadium around the holidays. I mean, look how many Nebraska fans were in Louisville for volleyball on Tuesday night. Imagine what it would be when Nebraska plays in Michigan in a bowl game.
Yeah.
But if that's the case, then some venue in Florida, Arizona is going to come up with a fat NIL deal for Nebraska to play in their game.
Well,
so that's how it's going to go down.
Bill, why should Nebraska be playing in Arizona or in Florida in December when they could be playing in Lincoln?
In the playoff?
Huh?
Ooh.
I missed that. The German was attacking me. What'd you say?
Oh, I just said, why should Nebraska be worried about playing in Arizona or in Florida in December when they could be playing in Lincoln?
In the playoffs. Yeah, I said
Well,
it for the season.
Elijah would like people to winterize Memorial Stadium.
Yeah. Heated turf.
If you want to score 47-13, there you go.
Three shooters of Jack Daniels for each fan to keep them warm. Or you get like little, what are the dogs with they have the little barrels of brandy?
The Huskies?
Is it?
Or no, the St. Bernards.
St. Bernards.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have those taken around to people in the stadium to keep them warm in a cold weather game.
That'll do it for us. We'll be back on Sunday with reaction and possibly a live Average Joe Sports Show, getting you ready for prime time. Gary Sharp, Bill Doleman, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt. Thanks for tuning in to the Average Joe Sports Show.